An amazing technique that helps you eliminate trauma? What? Welcome to the Joyous Expansion podcast. I'm your host, Brett Dupree, scouring the globe to bring you stories of courage, passion, and resilience. If I could sum up this podcast into one word, I would use empathy. Now let's get inspired. Welcome to the Joyous Expansion podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Brett Dupree, here to talk to you about all the wonders of the world and what's going on in my life and junk. And then you get to hear an interview. How fun is that? And then I wrap it up. So now this is the 7th episode of my podcast. I am excited. If you remember a few podcasts ago, I believe, episode 5, the one before last, I interviewed a Julie Gray. It was fun talking to her. If you were wondering about her, she did it. She was talking about going out and talking to some places to put in her products. And she did it. And it looks like this September, you might see some extra product from Julie Gray. How exciting is that? You know, one of the benefits of editing is the fact that I kept on calling her Julie Grimm when I was recording my parts, because I interviewed Julie Grimm before, and having two Julies that both start with a G. But luckily I edited that out, so you didn't know until I just told you. But it is amazing to me to see people's growth. I love seeing people's growth. That's something that's really kept me going on in this business, even though I haven't had the success that I've wanted to. As I've pushed forward, I still get inklings. There's this TV show called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and there's this song about this. There's this girl who's in love with this guy named Josh, and they start kind of sort of hooking up at one point. But Josh is treating her pretty much like crap because he's a very selfish person. More self-centered than selfish. He's actually a decently nice guy, he's just kind of narcissistic. Well, anyway. She has this song where she talks about love kernels, those brief moments that make it all worth it. And that's what it feels like it's been for the last 8 or 10 years. I just get these success kernels, people I've talked to, people who I've had interactions with. And because partly, I always say partly, because all I can do is just be there for someone, which is a lot. I'm one of those people who believe that you are your own guru, that any change you made is because of yourself, but not in the sense of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, because I believe that's BS. There is no such thing as a self-made millionaire, self-made success. That is a bunch of crap. Might be like 1 or 2 in the history of this world, but most people had someone to help. Most people had someone to lean on. Most people had someone to give them that amazing advice or someone to learn from. There's not a trailblazer who did it all. Heck, generally they had to learn a language from somebody. Technically, that's helping. But I do believe that it is you who makes the decision. Because when you give all your credit to somebody, if that somebody turns out to be a sham or take advantage of you later, all the positivity would go away because you gave your power to another person. So that's what I mean when I say that she did it because she deserves all the credit. All I did was support her. All I did. But it's so exciting to see success. I mean, that's one thing that's kept me into Toastmasters for the last 8 years, watching people grow, watching people get better. And one thing I'm doing is starting my own Toastmaster club. We have, at this point, the 2nd meeting. Generally, when I record this is the first meeting, but I am actually recording this on Wednesday, the night it goes out. Luckily, I don't have any people who are waiting for this every week. Maybe I should talk about myself like I'm a huge success already. What you think about expands. But here I am. But if we had 2 meetings, it was an interesting thing because this is me pushing out my comfort zone, asking for people to join me into something. I wanted to create a Toastmaster group for light workers, people who want to make a difference in this world, people who are motivational, people who are inspirational, people who want to bring great change. Because I've met so many people like that who don't like speaking and many more who don't mind it or enjoy it, but aren't very good at it. And I want to build a community where we work at better delivering our messages with a bunch of people who have similar backgrounds and desires. And to build on that it's been fun and challenging because putting myself out there is difficult. It's vulnerable. I have to create a vision and I have to get other people to buy in on it. And not only buy in on it with one of their biggest fears. It's almost like I'm creating a alligator wrestling league where we get a bunch of people to wrestle alligators. In fact, it would probably be easier to convince people to wrestle alligators than to get up in front of an audience and be vulnerable. But I believe in this vision, and I'm going to give it probably till February. I mean, if it doesn't happen by then, it probably won't happen, and I'll have to find another way to get my distinguished Toastmaster. So I have the long haul mindset, and I'm excited. I think we have good momentum so far, especially since it's mid-July, or now it's August, but it's really hard to get people to show up when it's sunny in Seattle. But that's what life is all about, is vulnerability, being vulnerable, putting yourself out there. What I've learned in my life is the more that I shut myself down, the worse my life is. See, when I protect myself from pain, life is continuous pain. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. This dull pain, and you don't truly get to feel joy. You don't truly get to feel happiness. You don't truly get to feel the ups because you don't let yourself feel the downs. And you try too hard to protect yourself from getting hurt, from being scared, from not pushing against your fears. Then you live your life afraid in a prison. And I say this because I know that's how I spent my 18 years stuck in a prison of my fears, feeling so alone, so much in pain, always constant, but not wanting to change because the thought could get worse. And since I have changed, I felt pain, I felt loss, I felt the sadness of a Trump presidency still going. Phew. Man, I cannot wait until that eclipse guru person. Man, I hope he's right and August turns out to be the end of his presidency. Anyway, now that I have insulted all Trump supporters from listening to this podcast, I live that way. And that is why I love talking to people who help with trauma, to help better lives and help people through trauma. Because my trauma led me to a bad place. And luckily there's people like my next guest, who helps people with trauma. My friend Angie Charlebois is a professional business coach. I probably should learn how to say her name. Who lives in the Yukon. We met in Seattle when we both got certified by Mike Dooley to train the Infinite Possibilities program. Since then, we kept in touch and help each other grow our personal brands and businesses. Most recently, Angie launched a trauma and fear hacking practice based on a cutting-edge neuroscience that uses delta brainwaves to relieve pain, phobias, PTSD, and mental blocks. Angie uses havening techniques, as it's called, to create new neural pathways for safety, courage, and success in the amygdala of her clients. She has seen huge transformations in her clients once they hack their fears. Over the past year, it's been fascinating to talk to Angie about how this healing modality worked to help entrepreneurs get past their limits and get comfortable being visible, vulnerable, and making money. I hope you enjoy our fast-paced talk. She's French-Canadian, which is why she says process incorrectly. Sorry, I like making fun of Canadians the way they say process. She is so passionate and chatty. And now it is my pleasure to introduce yourself to the amazing Angie Charlebois. Welcome, Angie, to my podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. We met about 5-6 years ago, 2012, I believe, at the Infinite Possibilities Train the Trainer.
Yeah, I think it was in Seattle in 2013. And yeah, I remember walking up to you and getting one of the best hugs of my life. So that was very cool.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite hugs too. You have hug skills.
Thanks.
So tell us, what do you do?
Primarily, I'm a professional coach, but what I've found over the last little while is that there's a big need for trauma work. So I've incorporated a technique into my coaching and also just separately in trauma work called havening techniques. And so for the most part, I've actually been helping people remove old encoded trauma, any kind of blocks or limitations that they might have, traumatic memories, that sort of thing. And that's been really beneficial to my coaching clients, as well as just people who are suffering.
Oh, wow. How did you get into that?
One of the ways, I guess, is I was struggling as a coach. I was doing some pretty good work, but I wasn't able always to help people get past some of those limiting beliefs or blocks that they had that were actually kind of deeply rooted in their subconscious and actually at the stage of the fight or flight or freeze kind of level of the brain. And one of my coaching colleagues that I had gone to coaching school with, she actually asked if I had ever heard of havening techniques. And I said no. And so she said, well, I think it's something you got to check out. Sort of on a dime, like without even really thinking about it. I just said, okay, yeah, if you think it's going to help with this kind of stuff, then I'm in. And so I went to the first ever Canadian-based havening techniques training. And it was 2 days of pretty crazy neuroscience. And it's not really my field. Like I didn't study psychology or even really advanced biology. So learning this intense, very science-based, chemistry-based process was a bit above me, but it was amazing. And I just started incorporating it as I was getting certified and as I was going through the case studies that I had to, and as I was studying all the science and ethical background, just the results that I was seeing were crazy phenomenal. And I was like, okay, there's definitely something to this. I'm so glad I came. I'm going to make this work. Like I'm going to find a way to get this to as many people as I can. So it's kind of almost by, I want to say kind of by divine intervention, but also just, seeing a need. Like there are just so many people who are suffering with fears that are holding them back. So I'm really passionate about helping.
That's really cool. I'm wondering, can you describe your struggles as a coach before you decided to do this havening technique?
Well, I did. And partly, if I get right into the embarrassing struggles, partly I think it was my own stuff. Like I felt a bit cheesy when I promoted coaching so much, because as I was becoming a coach almost 10 years ago, which had actually been my dream, and I was so embarrassed by having this dream, kind of like the who do you think you are sort of stuff. Someone really called me on it and kind of pushed me, and that was helpful. But then when I actually got into it, I found that differentiating myself from other people who were coaching was hard. A lot of people were calling themselves coaches, even though they weren't ICF certified, and I was, and it was really hard to stand out. But the other bigger problem beyond marketing was actually that a lot of my clients were coming to me and they were being paid for by another agency. Like I had contracts to help out, and I would take these contracts, but my clients had absolutely no skin in the game. So the coaching was being provided for free. They were expected to show up, but also to keep the commitments that they set for themselves from one week to the next. And a lot of them just weren't ready. And the reason they weren't ready for the most part, and this is overgeneralizing, but a lot of people actually had deeper like self-worth issues. They had a lot more significant traumas from their past. And that was the biggest holdback. And I didn't really have a solution for that. Like I had all these coaching methods, but nothing to tackle the deep, stuff in the reptilian brain, stuff that was like the caveman brain stuff. I just couldn't reach that part of the brain through exercises and logic and whatever coaches do. Like I have a lot of tools at my belt, or up my sleeve, but I wasn't able to actually get to that really deep fear place.
So I'm interested in hearing the fact that you had people who would come to you, but they had no skin in the game. So I'm sure some of them probably didn't take it as seriously as you would like. Did you have any problems taking that personal?
Not really. I mean, I've fired clients, which doesn't sound very nice, but there have been clients that it just hasn't been a good match. They've wanted change, but they've actually wanted me to do the changing for them. And it's just, coaching is just not really that. It's, it's a hugely beneficial helping tool and strategy tool and a support and a cheerleader and someone who's going to help you understand, well, what I believe is personal power, all the possibilities that exist, places where you can pivot and choose differently, and just really help to retrain your mind. But when people were coming to me and they were absolutely to the point, and I mean, I'm maybe for the most part, like my examples are a little more extreme because I live in a community where there were people who were really struggling and they had tried everything. So coaching was almost their last resort. And a lot of them had already given up. I knew I could help them if I could get them to believe that they were worthwhile and something else was possible. But that piece was really, really hard. And the reason that was so hard, now that I know what I know, is that they actually were never told that they were worthwhile. They just had absolutely no foundational belief that they were worthy, that they were important, that they were lovable. And a lot of that actually stemmed from really early trauma. Some of them didn't even recall the trauma. Even if I had been able to ask them about it when I was just a coach, they wouldn't have recalled it. There were some people who, like, literally, I was one of the only people in their lives that was trustworthy, that, didn't swear or abuse them in some way or fail to show up or something. I was sometimes the only person. So if you can imagine, like, not being able to trust anybody in your family, having lost a lot of friends to suicide or drug addiction or whatever, all the stuff, all the social problems, and then just have people betray your trust over and over again or treat you badly or whatever it is. So some of my clients at that time were kind of on the edge. I was sort of their last resort. And the problem with coaching is that it just wasn't exactly the right tool to heal the trauma. It'd be a life-changing tool if you believed your life could change. But if you don't, then you're just really going through the motions. It was a little bit, emotionally, it was a little bit hard on me for the sake of, I really like helping people. But I didn't take it personally because from a social perspective, I knew what these people were facing. I knew their lives. I knew the history, a lot of the history. I could see that they were really struggling and I was frustrated. But I didn't ever doubt coaching per se. And I didn't really doubt my ability. I just doubted, well, and this isn't really fair to say because I know a lot of counselors with really their hearts in the right place. But I doubted that if I referred them out to counseling, that they would come back in any reasonable time to actually achieve what they wanted, because counseling is long for trauma. It's really not a very effective way to resolve trauma in any quick fashion. The only ethical thing I could do was refer them out to counseling so that they could deal with the trauma. But often that was such a long process. Most of them haven't actually resolved the trauma, so they're not back. Anyway, sorry to start things off on a depressing note, but that was like a really big challenge I faced. And yet some of those people were the ones I really wanted to help. But there are also other clients that I've helped and that I've wanted to help that are really high achievers, and Havening has helped them too. So, there's definitely both streams.
So you're talking about earlier how you felt silly promoting coaching?
That I felt silly coaching?
Yeah, the marketing. Not coaching, but the marketing.
Oh, well, I definitely struggled with the marketing because I felt like everything that I said about coaching sounded like everything everybody else was saying. And my life wasn't in perfect shape. So there was a part of me that was, here I am. I know I can help people because I have a lot of case studies, done the work. I went to a really good coaching program. It was like very ethical, very high standards, really good tools. And yet, my life was still kind of, I don't want to say, messy, but it was a little messy at that time. And I felt, okay, so if I can't really demonstrate that I've got it all figured out, which I don't think anybody expects, but as a new coach, you think you have to have everything sorted so that you can actually wave a flag that's like, hey, listen to me, I know what I'm doing. So there's that piece, like that authentic, honest piece where I felt like I wasn't sure how to position myself. And then there are so many people offering so many coaching services, and I didn't know how I could really differentiate myself because I didn't do a great job of establishing the niche I wanted, or niche maybe as Americans call it. But I didn't have that really well defined because in my view, coaching could help so many different people. And I had used it on leaders. I had used it on writers, on speakers. I'd helped people launch businesses. Like I had some success under my belt, but it was kind of scattered across all sorts of markets. So I didn't do a great job of marketing and I was shy about it. I guess the other piece of it, I would say, is when I used words that were aligned with coaching or what I thought was aligned with coaching at the time, I sounded super flaky. And I had always done these pretty serious jobs and I could negotiate, stand across from people, give them HELL. Like I absolutely have a really strong voice and I've achieved a lot of pretty neat things for considering where I live and who I am. But every time I used coaching type words, I felt like I sounded like somebody who, I don't know, was doing this from their mother's basement high all day. I was like, these words just don't sound like business words to me. I guess that's where part of the struggle came from. It all sounded super flaky and I couldn't believe anybody would pay me based on the ads that I was writing. And the ironic thing is I spent years in journalism. I was an ads writer. I used to be like in marketing. I've been in like high level marketing and political positions. And for other people, I had absolutely no problem writing for them and making them sound like incredibly credible and just really serious if they needed to be and also approachable. But I could not do it for myself. And I think one of the silliest things is that I never asked for help. And like that's still boggles my mind when I think about it now. Like I'm like, why on earth did I not reach out? I have so many brilliant friends. Like, why didn't I get someone to do this for me? But, there's a lot to learn in entrepreneurship. So I'm certainly still learning.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a learning game. I mean, there's a lot to learn, especially how to ask for help. Because I've noticed about my business, my business is me, and there's just blocks of the vulnerability in a way to ask people to help me out with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're alone a lot, when we work for ourselves and we're entrepreneurs kind of alone in a service industry trying to help other people. It kind of feels like we should already know everything there is to know if we're trying to help other people, which is really false. And a lot of people have helped me understand that is the craziest thing, but I still get stuck into, I still on occasion get stuck into that. But also I think because I work alone. I have a building on my property. It's like a 12 by 12 office, which right now is a chicken hatchery. So that's why there's peeping and chirping in the background. But the idea that when you're in an office with a group of people or when you're even in a collective studio, like a co-space, there's always someone who's going to set you straight to some degree. You're going to get some sort of honest feedback or support. And alone, it's like this extra effort to actually go, okay, hang on. Am I even on the right track here? Or is there a better way to say this? Or better yet, is it me who's supposed to be even doing this? And because there's not naturally someone to delegate to, like there used to be in other parts of my life, I sometimes just get sucked into doing something that is absolutely not my zone of genius. And I would definitely say it's common. So many of the entrepreneurs that I help, with coaching or even like with havening, like helping them just get straight. Because when you do enough of those little mundane things that you're really, really not good at, you start to feel like you're never achieving anything and that you're not brilliant at all because you're never in your zone of brilliance. You forget, why am I special? Oh, right. I can't remember because I'm doing all the bookkeeping and I'm doing all the silly fiddling with the Canva design app and I'm fixing my website and this is not my zone of genius. And day after day, if you just do that stuff, you actually forget why you're brilliant at what you do because you're not doing enough of that. And I've gotten my butt kicked by other entrepreneurs who are further ahead, who are like, what are you doing? That is not your job. Find someone to do that. And that's been really, really helpful.
How did that land the first time you heard that? Someone told you?
Who told me? Maybe the first, I can't tell you the exact first time. I have tried to hire people before and it hasn't always worked out because I haven't been clear about what I want. So sometimes it's come up and I've tried it and it hasn't worked, which reinforced my false belief that I had to do it myself. But Jonathan Benjamin was really, really good. He was fantastic at sort of kicking me out of those zones where I'm not brilliant. And that's been helpful. But part of it too is he's been really great at the money mindset stuff for me. And he's basically, said stuff like, okay, you are brilliant at what you're doing in some areas. You're really great at writing for other people. You're really good at helping people figure this stuff out. You're good. He's like identified where he feels that I've been kind of in my zone of genius. And that's been great. So I needed that, because sometimes you just feel like you're not, and you feel like you're stumbling around and wasting time. But then he's phoned me up and he said, like, what are you doing right now? And I've said, oh, I'm just doing an edit. I'm trying to edit something on a website I'm building myself. And he's like reamed me out. Like, what are you doing? That is absolutely not your zone of genius. I know you. This is not you. Stop it. Just put an end to it. And I was like, okay, yeah, thanks. I really needed to hear that, because it sucks. I hate it. Why am I doing this? It's sucking my day away. And I feel like I should be good at it, or I should be able to figure it out. And just the fact that I'm saying should twice in a sentence means I'm probably not in my zone of genius. So all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, what the hell am I doing? Stop. That's been good, because we all know the weeks go by quickly, the days go by super quickly, and there is only so much time, but there's a ton of money in the world. Like, there's no shortage of money. There's a new millionaire every, 22 minutes or something crazy. There's a new billionaire every week or something like that. And here I am, not giving someone whose zone of genius is, just as an example, building websites, because I want to not help people in my zone of genius, because somehow I feel like I have to be good at everything. It's the craziest thing. And I really started to call myself out on it and really just be like, no, stop. That's crazy. That's ridiculous. Stop it. Just don't. So I'm definitely getting better. And Jonathan was absolutely, he said it in a way that I had to hear. Like, he said it just so abruptly. And I was like, yeah, you're right. This is dumb. What am I doing? So sometimes you just need to hear it enough times, but you also need to hear it in a way that makes it seem ridiculous. And for me, that's who he was.
Oh, that's really good.
That's what he did.
It's very interesting. More and more interviewing I'm doing, the more theme I see of people being able to do great things for others. But when they do that stuff for themselves, there seems to be just that disconnect or a block to be able to do it for themselves.
Yeah. Oh, I see that all the time. Yeah, it happens. It absolutely happens. I would say for probably like 60% of the people that I do some writing for, they are really, really great. They're great at writing technically, subject matter, their stuff, but how they describe what they do, they don't do a great job writing that. And that was the struggle that I had when I was doing marketing for myself in my coaching. I wasn't able to do it, but I can do it. Like, I can do it all day long for people. And it's really funny. Like, I think that's an interesting thing, how much we struggle to explain or to clearly like get our egos out of the way and just state what we do and why it's important and how it can help. Because I guarantee almost every single person that I know who's in business, maybe not a giant, conglomerate that is based in some giant city with, 10,000 employees, but everybody that I know who's an entrepreneur actually really does it, cares a lot about doing it for the impact they're making, for the difference they're making, for the help that they're providing. Like, nobody goes, yeah, I'm doing this because I might make more than my job. I've never heard one entrepreneur ever, ever, ever say that. And I've been helping people who are entrepreneurs, like as a coach since, 2010, I think. And then before that, I was doing other work with entrepreneurs, and no one has ever said it's about the money. And here we are struggling to explain what we do, and we can do so much good, and we stumble. And I really do think that it's that fear of being judged. And back to havening, like, that is one of the biggest things that comes up in havening, is this fear of being judged, this like worry about standing out in a way that it causes negative attention, or in a way where the attention that they get isn't in line or doesn't match up with how they feel about themselves, because they're so critical. And there's this sort of worthiness and fear of judgment theme that kind of weaves its way through, most of my entrepreneur clients, even in havening. And I mean, we resolve it, but there's definitely, I'm sure you're seeing it, and I definitely see it.
Oh, definitely.
In my practice.
The standing out, the judgments. I mean, a lot of times it's so much easier to pay attention to the negative feedback rather than to look at all the positive feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I will say this, like, I had a client, I did a pro bono, and I had a client a week and a half ago And they were asking a little bit about havening, like, how did you figure this out? Like, I haven't even heard of this. And I talked a little bit about it, and I said how grateful I was to have figured it out because it's really transformed my coaching practice, but also like just in general, like the people that I help, how much help I've been. And it doesn't even feel like I'm doing anything, but I'm facilitating this thing that's happening for them. And I said, I don't think that there's anything in the world I would trade for having learned this technique. And as soon as I said that, I thought, okay, that's a pretty bold statement. Like, can I back that up? Is that for sure? And then I started thinking about all the things that if I had a magic wand, what would I change in the world if it meant I could never do havening again or havening didn't exist? And there wasn't one thing. And I'm a pretty passionate advocate for animal welfare, children, foster kids, so many things. And there wasn't one thing. And I thought, okay, what does that mean? And it turned out that what it means is this power that people can have if they know how to do this over all of everything we've talked about that's a challenge is all related, all back to the caveman brain, all back to that original, just stay safe, just stay like under the radar, stay safe because you'll die. All of this stuff about kind of being in the shadows, not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to reach too high, not wanting to exceed the social status of the people in your community or the people in your family. All of those things, even just the fear of the responsibility of having more income or higher, whatever, all the stuff, just everything that people say that they worry about, havening can fix. And then I thought, okay, so if there's nothing, I mean, I'm sure there's things havening can't fix, to be honest, but all of the stuff that shows up with my clients, I wouldn't have another method. And it really struck me as I was doing this pro bono for someone who was actually like suicidal and reached out. I thought, okay, wow, that's like, I'm pretty darn grateful, to be honest, for the job I get to do. And I feel like if I can help people remove anything that's in their way so that they can feel how I feel about work now, and so that they can do whatever it is that they need to do with whatever passion or talent or, inspiration that they have, then that's why I'm on the planet. So you caught me in a, really good place in my business, I guess.
That's awesome.
I'm really,
so how
really
was the
grateful.
transition from life coach to utilizing this havening technique?
Well, the biggest part I would say right now is now I have 2 physical locations. Like I have 2 clinics and I tend to do, so like I travel from my little town, like an hour and a half, 2 days a week. And I have a physical space and a rental kind of boardroom space that I rent out, but I also host group sessions in there. And so I feel people want more one-on-one now that I'm doing more of the trauma work or more of the really kind of deeper stuff. Although it's not necessary. It works really, really well on Skype and on Zoom, and I do it all the time that way. A lot of the people who are in the Yukon actually want it face-to-face. So that's kind of been interesting and nice in lots of ways. My sense of connection to people is increasing, and that's awesome. I feel like this is way, 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 way easier to sell. And I don't even really market very much or do very much, but this is the word of mouth spreading of what I do now is wildfire. There's a lot of people who don't always understand what coaching means. And there's a lot of people who use the term and they really mean that they're mentoring someone because they've learned how to do something and they're teaching you how. Kind of like a football coach, played football and then they became a coach and now they're telling you how to do football. And it's a little different than that. And it was, I guess, a little harder to articulate. And now, like, people will show up to a havening session. They got referred by a friend. I have no idea what the friend told them because sometimes they're dealing with really intense personal stuff. And so I don't know if they told the friend what they were dealing with. And then, so anyway, people show up because a friend told them. That didn't happen very often with coaching. It happens sometimes, but not like this. And so this is kind of, it's a snowball effect for sure. I take it really serious. I dedicate time. I have, dedicated scheduled time in my calendar for it. Coaching hardly gets booked. To be honest, right now, I'm kind of okay with that. There's such a huge number of people who have phobias or fears or PTSD or compassion fatigue or whatever it is. Like, there's just so many things that are going on in people's lives that if this is the priority and this is making people well, then I'm okay with that too. Because once people are well, then they're going to go find a coach or they're going to come back to me for a coaching or some sort of program that I offer that's really going to help them do the thing they need to do. But if some bigger issue is kind of overshadowing, then that sucks so much energy. You just, at the end of the day, you just don't have time to write that book, or you don't have time to, launch that podcast or do whatever it is that people were coming to me for. They're just busy, not reacting, and just trying to keep their lives together. And if I can help with that, if I can actually release that trauma, a level in the amygdala that is quick, safe, easy, permanent, that is huge. And I recognize that because I see it every single week. I see it and I'm like, yeah, okay, that was worthwhile. I'm glad they spent an hour and a half doing that, instead of me talking them into, seeing their value and all the possibilities if they just wrote the first blog post. Like, it seems trivial in some ways to rush coaching when I know there's trauma. It's completely changed everything about my business, actually. I will say that. And it feels like coaching was the gateway to getting to this place. And I think I'll end up being able to smush them back together a little bit more. I'm actually launched a program specifically for entrepreneurs where we're getting rid of the 3 main blocks or fears that stand in the way specifically for entrepreneurs. And it's a 3-part havening program that involves some coaching aspects too, because after you're done the havening program, you get to go take a step. But I know what most entrepreneurs are afraid of to some degree, whether they will call it a fear. Lots of them will call it a reason, and it'll be really justifiable. For the most part, it boils down to that fear of judgment and standing out and being just a bigger target, that sense of worthiness because they have the who the hell am I to think I can do this, and gives me the right to break out of the norm. And then they have the actual fear sometimes of, what if I fail? Like, oh my gosh, my family counts on me, or I have to support myself. And there's this whole safety, like the real fundamental, can I feed myself, put a roof over my head, safety stuff. Lots of times they're totally fine and they're supported financially, but it's still that fear of being dependent or all of that stuff. And sometimes you actually need a little bit of that to really light a fire under yourself when you're an entrepreneur. But if you have too much of it, then you're just paralyzed and you stay in the job that you're in. If you stay in that job too long, there's no way you're getting out. Worse, sometimes you actually become a non-contributor or a toxic energy in the place you're staying, because you're staying for the wrong reasons. You're actually staying for money. So that's kind of a double negative right there. That's a program I'm just writing right now. I'd like to launch that and make it really accessible for people, because a lot of people can't pay the rate of a private havening session because there's such a consistent theme. It's be a really, I think, a fairly beneficial group program. So I'm working on that.
That sounds very exciting. Can you spend a few minutes to give a basic of how havening works?
Yeah. So it sounds a bit flaky when I describe it. Trust me, it's based in neuroscience and it was developed by some doctors in New York. It's a touch-based technique. I'll describe it as though it was like an online session. The person on the other end will be on a Zoom or a Skype call. And so I'll see them, they'll see me. And I basically start off the session by describing what the motions are that they're going to use to touch themselves. It's the hands, like rubbing the hands up and down, kind of in a prayer position, but just like stroking up and down. Or, because you can switch hand touching locations, across the eyebrows, kind of like a hand, or sort of like a face wash with your hands, just across your brow and your upper cheekbone. Or you can do this one as well, your upper arms from your shoulder down to your elbow. So you're just stroking down, like 1 second strokes, and then you're lifting your hand and starting up at the shoulder again. So basically the whole session, people are touching one of these 3 places or circling through, and so am I. So I'm in delta state, they're in delta state, because the touching places that we're using actually create delta brainwaves. After about the 5-minute mark in the session, they're actually in delta state, but they're totally conscious. They have full ability to recall and talk. They can use logic. They can do whatever they want. But the really cool part is that they're actually it feels like you're kind of in a relaxed state, but you have hyper access, I want to say, to memories and feelings in a way that's a little different than conscious thought. If you recall in your daily life something terrible that happened to you, you're probably going to trigger some of the original bodily responses. If you think of something very, very stressful or painful from the past, you might get the excess beating heart rate. You might get like tight in your stomach. You might get sweaty hands. And you're actually recreating a lot of the chemical and electrical processes in the brain of the original trauma. is you're actually strengthening that neural pathway. But in the delta state, when you recall those things, you're actually weakening that response. And what we're actually doing with the chemical and electrical process happening in delta state is we're removing that encoded memory, which is a little like, it's an AMPA receptor on the amygdala. But really what I call it is, it's almost like a receptacle that you plug in, like you have an extension cord or a cord for a blow dryer and you're plugging it into the wall. That AMPA receptor is like the plug. And when you get triggered, you're plugging it in, you're completing the circuit and you're getting the response. But if we get rid of the plug, there's nothing to plug the trauma trigger into. Like there's just nothing. It's, you might see a dog and you're afraid of dogs because of some terrible memories and some terrible things that happened. You're not triggered because there's nothing to complete the electrical circuit. And the brain is such an electrical and chemical hotspot that basically we're kind of reverse engineering the trauma. People will start a session knowing usually what's bothering them. They might not always remember the original cause because it might have happened before their memory really is functional. So it could be something really, really early on. They're feeling, they know something's up around dogs. They can't remember the exact thing, but they've always been afraid of dogs. And they're just, it's getting to the point now where they feel panicked every time they hear a dog bark, whatever it is. I'm just using that as an example. But even if they don't have the original memory accessible because it happened so early or they blocked it out, we can still go into all the emotions and all of the access, almost like hack that little neural network and still have results to change the amygdala in that one sort of encoded trauma place. If you can imagine, some people have multiple things going on. So they might have had a car crash, they had a bad divorce, they had a distant parent, they had, a dog thing on the block, they had a terrible dog that chased them all the time, they had bullying in high school, they had a weight issue where, they felt terrible about themselves, and they had a really bad breakup, and then they had most of us have multiple things in our lives. And if each one of those is a trauma, each one of those is creating an AMPA receptor. And that means that we have all these potentials in the outside world that are triggers connecting to these encoded trauma parts all day long. Like there are people in my community that have everything I've said and more, and multiple of each one of those things, because some of the people who live in Northern Canada who are Aboriginal have been through a lot. But not just them. I mean, there's tons of people who've just been through a lot. And you get a stressful job and that just pulls on the resources. You get an illness that pulls on your resources. And the more encoded traumas you've had, like the more AMPA receptors you have, the more susceptible you are to severe trauma every subsequent time that you get traumatized. So there's almost like this breaking point. Maybe it's not a breaking point. Maybe it's like just this tipping point or saturation. And just people end up in situations where they have more stress than they can actually handle in their nervous system. I have clients who have multiple negative events on top of a stressful job, on top of a bad marriage, on top of illness or anxiety disorder. They're just getting up in the morning is a big deal. Just going to work most days of the week is huge for them. They don't sleep well. They are medicated. They don't feel good. They are not able to have a social life. They're not able to learn anything new. There's no way they're taking a night class. They are maxed out. And so they're just surviving because they're triggered so much. It's just such a toxic load on the body, because every time you go into fight, flight, or freeze, you are bombarded. Your whole system is bombarded with hormones, survival hormones that are really hard on the body. Havening, I mean, basically, I don't want to say one trauma at a time, because often you can resolve more than one trauma in a session because they happen to be connected in some way, like on the amygdala. But so far, my track record has been like one trauma per session, and sometimes more, because every single dog attack can be settled like in one session. It's not like each one has to have its own separate havening session to fix it or to heal it. But it's been fast. It's been really, really transformative. And then throughout the session, really they're just feeling better and better. And then by the end of the session, they're choosing how they want to feel instead. And so havening is used to kind of create new neural networks that are more positive. And that I really like. So for high level leadership or entrepreneurial havening, you quickly get rid of the block, because usually it's fairly clear what it is, but then you're rewiring for something that they actually do want. And what's really, really cool and genius is we can actually wire in through the delta waves while we're in it a future goal. We can make it seem so commonplace and so benign in through havening that we're actually wiring it in as something that's just obvious and eventual. There's no response from the ego or the subconscious brain or even from, the inner caveman that's like, oh my God, that's a threat. Don't go do that. Like, don't launch a new business. Don't try this. Don't launch a YouTube channel, whatever. I don't know. All the stuff that we might want to do that's a little more bold as an entrepreneur or as a human. Hey, I've always wanted to learn to paint, and there's this like gallery opening and they have this open contest. That would be very, very scary to a lot of people in an irrational, scary way. But that fear of being out there and being exposed and being ridiculed or being embarrassed is really huge. And it's connected to the reptilian brain. A lot of people don't pursue and don't try, partly because of that stuff. So what I do is I kind of normalize that stuff through the havening process, and I map it in as though it's just kind of encoded and wired, and it's not perceived as a threat. Like, it's just like, yeah, of course you're going to, do YouTube. Sure. Like, let's talk about all the ways that doing YouTube is like mainstream. It's safe for you. It feels good. Like, what are all the things you want it to feel like? Okay, let's practice feeling that right now and wire it in. It's been really, really cool that way. To be honest, I want to do more of that because it's extremely powerful.
Wow, that sounds really cool. We are towards the end of our time. And one thing I like to ask my interviewees is for 1 minute of motivation. Maybe some advice you'd give to a younger self, or the one thing that you want people to walk away with, something along those lines. So are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. And I'll actually give a little hack while I'm at it. So we talk a lot about doing affirmations and that sort of thing. And sometimes they work really well if they're in line with something you already believe. If you incorporate havening touch, so one of the places we talked about, either like upper arm or rubbing your hands together or over the top of your eyelids, and just do something easy. Today, I am deeply committed to taking a step in the direction of my dreams. And if you do that while you're rubbing your hands almost in prayer mode, and you just do that over and over again, something really powerful yet super implementable, or looking in the mirror in the morning and just as you're washing your face and just do a couple extra little rubs and just say, I'm learning to see my inner beauty and power every day. Something like that, just a little stepping stone in the direction that you want to take. And nothing too abrupt, because as we, know, affirmations that really feel untrue sometimes actually demotivate us. But there's lots of ways to use the body, incorporate the power of the body and what it can do for our brain into some of the motivational stuff that we do every day. So I don't really have anything much more revolutionary to introduce other than havening techniques as a body, integration, and really getting the brain going kind of online and on stream with whatever your goals are.
Wow, that was good. One thing I like about your story is the fact that you started out in a way to help people and to serve people. And unfortunately, that didn't set up your desires in the way that you wanted. Well, maybe not unfortunately, because you kept at it. You kept on going forward, and then you found something that fit. So the first thing you did was a stepping stone for the next thing, which was the havening techniques, which any listener can tell is how excited and passionate you are to do that. I think your story of going forward, and maybe this thing I'm doing right now is silly, but it will lead me towards the next step. Because a lot of times we entrepreneurs like to think that this first thing that we do is going to be the thing that works, when really it's just a stepping stone for the next best thing for us. So thank you so much for being on my podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I look forward to checking out your havening technique and your program.
Thank you.
Exciting.
Yes, thanks for having me. It was really, really nice. And I know I talked a lot. I really do honestly love what I do. And I know I get carried away, but I just never want anybody to think that if things aren't working out right now in this moment, that it doesn't mean something else isn't down the path or little ways out of sight. I think when you're doing what you love, or you're working on doing what you love, trying to find what you love, you just actually have to keep taking steps forward. And almost everybody that I've ever heard talk about success or even fulfillment, like never mind success, because everybody thinks that's maybe high pressure, but just loving what you do every day, I think is so important. And if you're not quite there yet, or there's parts that you love and parts that you don't love, delegate away. Stop doing the stuff you don't love doing. Really, really do not take 8 or 10 or however long it's taken me. Just get rid of that stuff. Get someone else who's passionate about that to do it, and do your zone of genius. If you're really, really good at something and it feels that easy, chances are you have something you can help and teach the rest of us, because we're not all good at the same stuff. And I think that's great. I think that makes things really beautiful in the world. I feel like maybe I'm not the best coach in the world, but I'm sure as hell a fantastic healer. I can help them get ready to meet the best coach for them. Then I'm happy to do the havening because I love doing that part of it. So it's kind of, we're not the beginning of the story. We're not the whole story. We're not the end of the story. We're part of a big story. And I think that that's important to remember when we work alone so much, is we're just a piece of someone's growth. We're just a piece of our own growth. We need others. We need to be inspired. We need to have other influences. And I think that, as my maybe second, I'm going to cheat and get 2 little inspirational pieces, but you don't have to have it all figured out alone. Keep getting help. Keep listening to other people. There's so much room for all of us to be helping the people we're meant to serve, that we don't have to, I don't know. It feels like there's so much pressure to be so unique and stand out so much and be the only one. And the truth is, it's way more fun when there's a lot of us trying to move the ball forward, than just one of us, each on our own field, each with our own ball. So yeah, I'm definitely inspired by the work you're doing. I really want to thank you for launching this podcast. It's a brilliant concept. I'm very grateful.
Awesome. Well, I will.
So thank you, Brett.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on. I will talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye. And
there you have it, folks. My friend Angie. Wow. Can she talk, or can she talk? And did you notice she kept saying, I can't even say process. Process? I need to work on my Canadian. The having technique is pretty cool. It kind of reminds me of EFT, but it's a little different. And Angie is masterful at it. During her training, I was able to sample it because she needed a certain amount of clients to get her certification. So she was giving it away for her friends. And I'm one of her friends that went through her process. And it was great. It helped me a lot with a lot of my past traumas. It helped me a lot with being more vulnerable. And it's something I do generally count as something that's really helped me in the last couple of years work on myself. And I plan on doing it again, probably sometime this month. Depends on how well I budget my money. Oh, money. But one thing I truly get from Angie is her desire to serve others and to help people. And I love that part of her story. I wasn't joking when I was talking about someone who went for something and then found something better through it. Because life, your journey in entrepreneurship or anything, and really, doesn't always take you to where you think you'll end up. I mean, we met at Mike Dooley's place and he started selling t-shirts with his brother, motivational t-shirts, and that business folded. And then he started Tut. And now he was on The Secret, and now he's one of the biggest people in the world when it comes to personal development. That wasn't something he was going for. And Angie didn't start out wanting to do havening. She started out wanting to be a coach and teaching law of attraction. And now she's doing this havening thing and helping people relieve their trauma. Isn't that cool? Life is a bunch of zigzags and zag-zigs. I very much believe that. This episode's a little long, so I will keep this part short. Angie is offering Joyous Expansion listeners a special. More pain. Oh, sorry. More joy. That makes a lot more sense. More joy, less pain. Resolve trauma and painful triggers and create more ease, joy, and success with havening techniques. You can find that link to schedule with her and see what her special offer is on my website, pod.joyousexpansion.com. Underneath, I'll put a link to her Acuity scheduling. See, she uses Acuity because she knows what's up. Angie is a genius. You can find Angie on Facebook. At Angie Charlebois, Your Fearless Mind. AngieCharlebois. HTT. Oh, I'm not doing HTT. You can find her at www.facebook.com/healthyworthywealthy, or by emailing her at hopehealshine@gmail.com. Those are very easy to remember links. Why did I choose Joyous Expansion? Just kidding. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can check out more at pod.joyousexpansion.com or wherever podcasts are found. If you have looked for it at a place like you couldn't find it, tell me and I'll put it there. You can tell me, or if you have any questions, you can email me at brettdupree@joyousexpansion.com. That's BRE 2 T's, DUPR 2 E's at joyousexpansion.com. And if you see sex pansion, you know you spelled it correctly. You can download a free ebook at joyousexpansion.com and find more information about yours truly, if you'd like. If you say, man, I would like to give Brett Dupree some money and I also need a great way to schedule people, you can go to his website at pod.joyousexpansion.com, and there you see an affiliate link for Acuity Scheduling, what I use to schedule. And as somebody who gets easily overwhelmed over scheduling, Acuity Scheduling is amazingly awesome and easy, and I love it more than something really funny than R2-D2 loves being a jerk to C-3PO. Was that funny? I thank you again for listening to this podcast. I am Brett Dupree, your Joyous Expansion Life Coach, champion of authentic joy, catalyst of transformation, person with the most titles ever. Take that, Daenerys. And once again, I remind you to be love, to be joy, to be awesome. Now play my jingle.
JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Come and say hello to Brett Dupree. He is an inspirational life coach. Good for you and good for me. He turned my life from grey to blue. I'm sure he'll do the same for you. Get in touch and you'll see your life will change dramatically. JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Yeah.